This podcast brought to you by Darby Field Advisors, elevating local impact and enhancing global engagement. Principals Matthew Bartlett and Scott Merrick create local leverage to achieve client success while devising unique strategies that help clients gain a competitive advantage in the marketplace and around the world. Find them online at darbyfieldadvisors.com. So please welcome to the New Hampshire Journal Podcast, U.S. Attorney Erin Creegan. Erin, welcome. Or U.S. What is the formal title? Master Attorney? What do we say?
I think I am a United States Attorney. I was instructed by those with more knowledge than myself that now that I am Senate confirmed, I am the Honorable.
Oh, well, you are certainly the Honorable. That's all I've heard about you, the Honorable. Mostly honorable. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I did some flack work back in the day for some attorneys general, and it used to drive me crazy, the ones that insisted, you shall call me general. Like, dude, that's not your title. That's a description of your title. You're the attorney, not the general. But whatever. Anyway, we're glad to have you here, and I'm glad to see you. And while not being busted for drugs, based on the press coming out of your office, you guys are busting drug dealers all over the place in the Granite State. So tell us about the current state of drugs and the related crime here in New Hampshire. And were you surprised by what you found when you were appointed to this job and took over this past summer?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I came up in the department from the time that I was 25. I entered the department in the honors program, and my first billet was national security. That's what I did for my first 10 years. Excellent. Counterterrorism, WMD. This is a more generalist posting, so it's certainly familiar. It's the world of federal prosecution, but this is every threat that comes at the citizens of the state of New Hampshire. And as you can imagine, everywhere drug trafficking is a major component of federal enforcement, in part because drug trafficking is almost always international and interstate. Here in New England, a lot of that, it's sourced from cartels in Mexico, but it's traded, delivered by Dominican Republic based trafficking organizations. And the federal government's better equipped in many cases to track that supply, to track those networks, to break up those networks in a way that really interdicts the amount of supply that moves into New Hampshire. And of course, we have to be cooperating with our state partners on all of that distribution network, all the way down to that line level dealer. But we have different areas of responsibility. So the trafficking, particularly the national and the international trafficking, is really an area of responsibility for us. That's true anywhere. I think you peruse through any U.S. Attorney's Office's postings, you're going to see that drug trafficking is a major component of the threat. And that's why it's such a priority for the Attorney General, for the President, to really be focused on international supply, the cartels, the major criminal networks that are moving large amounts of drugs into the United States. What's nice about New Hampshire compared to other states is that it is a lower crime environment in many ways. Right. I think people generally talk about how we have the lowest homicide rate in the United States. We have a high level of social responsibility and social cohesion. People report crimes. Right. People are willing to be witnesses. But we're not immune from the threats from large, violent criminal networks. We're not immune from drug trafficking organizations. We're not immune from violent street gangs, from international gangs, from firearm trafficking rings that are moving firearms into the hands of organized crime and into gangs and having them be used in very serious offenses. We're not immune from armed robberies, and we're not immune from crimes against children. These are all things that we're responsible for here at the United States Attorney's Office. So
you've been working in either counterterrorism or countercrime basically since 25. And so you were there when we had the huge OD spike, whether it was fentanyl or pre-fentanyl, you had other opioids. We had, it was a hot issue in politics, from 2014, that whole period, particularly in New Hampshire. And yet we just had the biggest 1-year drop, I believe, in opioid deaths in maybe ever, or it's certainly in a long time. What do you think has happened? Has the interdiction worked more, or has there been just a cultural shift away from it? Given your experience in law enforcement, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wish I could say it's all good. I think we are interdicting a lot of the supply, but unfortunately, part of the news is negative. It's a resurgence of meth. A lot of people are turning to meth and use of meth, which is less likely to cause an overdose death, but still extremely dangerous, very bad drug that is very harmful, shortens people's lives, that can be very violent under its influence. So I think we are having some success with the supply. We are having some success with things like drug courts. We have one here in New Hampshire getting people out of their addiction cycle. But some of the news is not good. We're seeing resurgence of other drugs that, while being less lethal, are still extremely harmful.
So let's talk about you for a little bit. I didn't realize that someone who was born in Malden, Massachusetts, would be allowed to enforce laws in New Hampshire. And I think we need to change the Constitution so that that doesn't happen. No, I'm kidding, of course. But where did you grow up, and what drew you to law school and law enforcement?
Thank you for accepting me. I think that there's a New Hampshire state.
The phrase is outing you. I outed you. You're never going to be right now. People in your office are going, "Wait, she's from where?" So
no,
sorry,
they know. And what they say in Texas when someone moves to Texas, which a lot of people do because Texas is a great place to live, they say you got here as soon as you're good. So that's what I think about living in New Hampshire. I can't control where I'm born, but I got here as soon as I could.
Right.
No, I grew up in northern Mass, so the Westford, Massachusetts area is where I grew up. My family subsequently moved to Merrimack, New Hampshire. So for me, it's sort of I'm one of those, Nashua to Lowell continuum, Irish Catholic families that kind of lived in that delta there. So that's kind of where I grew up. But like a lot of people in my generation, I'm born in the 80s, very, very influenced by 9/11. A lot of people chose to go into public service, chose to go into the military, national security, law enforcement, because they wanted to serve the country after 9/11. And I'm one of those people. I went to college down in DC, specifically studying national security in college at Georgetown. And then I went and studied criminal law at GW down in DC. Actually, the Attorney General of New Hampshire was a classmate of mine. He was a 1L when I was a 3L there. And then was able to combine both of those things into the job where I thought I could do the most good and be the most valuable in the post 9/11 years, which was prosecuting international terrorists. So I think had things been different, had 9/11 never happened, I very likely would have been a prosecutor in New England, my entire career. But I was called to national service like many people were. And I ended up having cases all over the country. Eventually went to all 50 states, had cases in probably 28 or so different offices over the years. So I'm one of those people that wanted to be where the action was essentially. And luckily for where my family lives and where I wanted to be very safe, that wasn't as much here in New England. But I wanted to be where the national security threat was.
And you served in the as a staffer for U.S. senators, including my old Senator Lindsey Graham. I'm from South Carolina. And then for Charles Grassley. My question for you is, can you do as many push-ups right now as Charles Grassley? Yes or no?
No, I can't. I wish, he is so fantastic. And
92 years old.
Oh, and he gets up and runs at 4 a.m. every morning, and he's still got a working farm. And he used to say his secret about how he's still running in his 90s is he didn't start till he was 70.
Right.
So, he's like, I don't think I've got 70 years on these knees.
Exactly.
I've only got 20 years into these knees. But no, he likes to do those push-up competitions with high school students and win. Wow. I've never been able to beat him myself, and I don't think I can now. Maybe it's a good goal to set.
So how does your experience working in D.C. inside the Senate, helping advise people on criminal strategy and counterterrorism strategy help you in your job here in New Hampshire?
I think the thing that's the most valuable, and there's certainly different schools of thought on this, and there's all kinds of U.S. attorneys, but our last few U.S. attorneys were distinguished prosecutors in our state government, leaders in the county attorney's office, in the Department of Justice. Sure. I thought it would be helpful to have someone who knew how the Department of Justice worked, how it was governed outside of DC, how all of those different organs and resources worked, so that I could pull more of that here to New Hampshire. Having been in the Deputy Attorney General's office, having been a Maine Justice Attorney that goes out and helps smaller districts with their more complicated cases, I felt that I knew well what some of the resources were and how some of the bureaucracy worked, and that was something that I could maybe bring to New Hampshire. Whereas some of my predecessors were maybe bringing their good relations with their deep contacts within the state, I could bring some connectivity with the resources of Maine Justice. And maybe next time around, they'll say, we'll try that or we'll try something different. Sure. But because it had been so many folks from kind of a similar background for the last few selections for U.S. Attorney, I thought this could be a chance for us to really make sure that New Hampshire is getting what it should be getting from our national resources.
So I assume that when you're at an event and you meet people, they just go, oh, you're certain. Yeah, I saw you guys were busted. They think you're the Attorney General of the state. So 2 questions. How do you just explain, actually, they're the Attorney General, they do this and that? And then number 2, you've seen around the country, particularly on the issue of immigration, that there's tension between how states want laws enforced and then the federal government, like who you represent, you're stepping in to enforce. What's the state of, are you guys getting along? Are there issues where you have a disagreement, different vision? Are we going to see pro-Creegan riots in the street anytime soon because we're so mad at John Formella? You hope not. Okay.
No, the Attorney General and I get on very, very well. I mean, I think New Hampshire is just a place where we have a very pro-law enforcement environment. We are all on the same team here. So every opportunity that we've had, we've sought it out to work together. And just to have a recent example, we had this incident a few weeks ago where the Brown MIT shooter was potentially on the loose in New Hampshire. The federal government's authorities and the state's authorities are totally different. John Formella and I were in touch all throughout the night, making sure that we were coordinated. We knew what his authorities were and his resources that were available were. We knew what mine were and what was available. And we were in great touch throughout the evening, making sure that had he driven somewhere, had he done a new attack, had he actually been alive, of course he was not, we were ready for that with our different resources that we bring to bear. So no, I don't think New Hampshire falls into these pitfalls that some states fall into, where there's kind of acrimony between the federal government and the state government. I've made it a point, and I know that many of my predecessors did this as well, but I made it a point to meet with the county attorneys to tell them, hey, here are my best investigative options. Here are my best charges. Let me know when I can help you.
Sure.
Let me know when I can cover this for you. There are certainly administrations and attorneys general in the past who thought, well, we want everything to be federal. That's not the way that we feel. We want to get the criminals. If they have a better charge than I do, I will support them 100%, and vice versa.
So I know that you've received a request to look at the Merrimack Elbit attack and the people involved from the federal standpoint. And I'm not going to ask you specifics about a case. That's, not cool. But
oh, you know better than that, huh?
Yeah. Well, I'm being coached, but plus I don't want to get arrested. So I'm just being extra careful in this interview. When you're interviewing people who can arrest you, it changes your total attitude. I just want to note that from my side of the mic. No, but seriously, there are some people who are frustrated when they see what appear to be violations of civil rights, which is in your bailiwick, not necessarily the Attorney General's. And they see what looks like, for example, you're attacking a company that's, based in Israel with lots of language and rhetoric that looks like hate crimey, whatever. And then there seems to be a national security overlay. It has been rare in the time that I've been in New Hampshire to see the U.S. attorney step up, and even if they don't take action, maybe I just want to be clear, we're looking at whatever the crime is, whether it's a Portsmouth, counterfeiting crime or whatever, where there's a federal application. So my question to you is, should that be part of your job, is stepping up and letting people know if there's a federal question that you're looking at it? Do you think the federal balance between enforcement in the state is about right? Do you think your office should step things up? What's your philosophical view of the matter without any specifics about one case?
It's a great question. One of the things that being an organization that's based out of DC comes with is a lot of guidance on these kinds of questions. So there is a policy, there is a Department of Justice policy about when you comment on an existing investigation, and it's pretty Spartan. And generally the guidance is, although it's up to me as the U.S. attorney whether to do that, I generally shouldn't unless there's a public safety issue. So for example, there's a shooter on the loose. We want to let the public know we've caught the person, that there's no longer a threat to the public. That's so that people know whether it's safe to move around. Generally, a historical investigation, you wouldn't comment on it. And that can be really hard. Sometimes you really want to tell the public the work you're doing, where you are. I mean, ultimately, the people of New Hampshire are my boss. I am doing this for them, and I want to keep the boss apprised of what I'm doing. So I wish I could share everything that we're working on. I'm sure it would give people much more confidence to do that, but it would also potentially have the effect of harming the investigation or of bringing people who are later determined to have not done anything wrong, bringing their names into disrepute. So you do have to be pretty careful, but it's not any lack of desire on my part to share that information with the boss. It's just that we have to really protect our investigations. I'd say stay tuned. There are certainly things that have happened in New Hampshire that people are wondering, hey, what are the feds doing about it? You've mentioned that. I can't comment on that specifically, but I've been in a few months now. It generally takes a little time to get a federal investigation to a point where we feel confident that we can charge something that is going to be totally supported, be credited by the jury. So that's something that, as you're watching my time in office get a little bit longer, you may see that some of the investigations that I took an interest in when I started have come.
So I have a New Hampshire Journal specific question, because we are the #1 political news outlet in the state, and our readers are very involved in campaigns. They follow them closely, et cetera. And there have been several incidents going back. There was the second congressional district race where you had illegal mail, millions of dollars pouring in. It was clearly illegal. And there were a lot of people who were frustrated. They're like, wait, this isn't a violation of state election law. This is an FEC Federal Election Commission violation. Where are the feds? And so the question that people ask is, when it comes to federal election law for and we've got a hot race for Senate, hot race for Congress, if something happens, is your office going to take a look, or is that an FEC lawyer's thing and it doesn't normally come to? Tell us dummies how this would normally work.
We have an election coordinator here. He's going to be very, very tightly connected across the federal government and the different agencies that have responsibility, and our state partners. That involves cross-training. That involves making sure that everybody knows what we can do, what our authorities are, and what powers we do have. It is something where every time a new set of facts comes up, you really have to look. What is everybody's tools? What's everything that we can do? And one of the fun things about being in New Hampshire is we get to be the tip of the spear on all of these things. If there's a new tactic, if there's a new criminal mode of kind of interfering with an election, we're going to see it first. There's not going to be a playbook. So we have to be really, really smart on these things, really, really connected with our partners, and really, really ready to toggle to whatever the new thing's going to be, because we're going to see it first.
Yeah, I didn't have fake robocall by Joe Biden magician guy in New Orleans on my card. That was not what I was expecting. I would agree. So let me ask about something else then. So you've demonstrated that there are drug cases. You guys have worked the drug cases. There's a steady stream of people who are selling significant amounts of dangerous drugs like fentanyl being busted. If you were giving a speech to a room full of criminals, which criminal area would you say you folks need to be particularly worried about us right now? Is it the white collar people? Is it, we just had the big bust with the organized retail theft where they were hitting all the Home Depots, including the ones here. There's obviously human trafficking, there's border, etc. Which criminal element should be the most nervous about what you're up to these days?
I wouldn't tell anybody to relax. We're gonna fulfill all parts of our mission.
Sure.
But, there is no secret. The Attorney General, the FBI Director. There's no secret that violent criminal networks and drug traffickers are our focus. We are very, very focused. So if someone is a member of a criminal gang, we have those in New Hampshire. Sometimes people don't know, but we have very operational national gang and international gang representation in New Hampshire. I would be worried. That is something that the federal government is very good at, breaking up gangs and incapacitating gang members from doing their criminal acts. So I would be worried if I were them. If I'm a drug trafficker, particularly if I'm a national, international drug trafficker, I'd be worried. But really, any criminal network. That's what the feds do. If someone is money laundering in New Hampshire, if they are human trafficking in New Hampshire, if they are trading firearms for crimes, they should be concerned, because we're going to be very, very coordinated with our other U.S. attorneys' offices, with our state partners, and we have every single law enforcement agency focused on violent crime and drugs.
I was talking to a former Department of Homeland Security, HSI, their investigations group, about his work, and he was working on criminal gangs and particularly tracking narcotics, counterfeits, because they use the counterfeits to create revenue for what they want to do, and he said that the moment that he was the most shocked, because I asked him this, and I'll ask you in a minute too, the most shocked was when he found out the number of people who were being trafficked as humans, not for sex, which is the story that makes the headlines. He said actually the majority are being used as enforced labor. And he talked about opening a room and seeing 50 people who were being held basically captive in a room for months at a time. And their job was to take knockoff goods and take the tags off, electronics, peel the tags off. They're working with chemicals. He said the room smelled awful. There were people who were clearly close to death in the room. And he was just horrified. He said he had no idea that was going on in the United States. And so If you have a comment on that, that would be great. But I also want to ask you, in your career in fighting crime, what's the one crime that you encountered that you're like, wow, I had, this is really, really a problem, or it's really out there?
We are definitely seeing a resurgence in labor trafficking. We're actually coordinated with the Department of Labor, and they're looking into these as well, which brings back a bunch of statutes that you don't see all the time. Peonage, slavery adjacent statutes, because this is
Did you say peonage?
Peonage.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not a lawyer guy, so you have to explain that to me. What's that mean?
When essentially someone's a peon, it's a form of.
Oh my gosh.
So we're seeing.
Can husbands apply to that? Can I get in? I could report a certain wife I know about. No, that's not going to.
We are seeing that. We are seeing a big comeback from labor trafficking. It being worthwhile for a lot of criminal organizations to do that. What I think is kind of interesting is this: what's old is new again. It's bringing up some of the older federal statutes that deal with protecting people from their labor being exploited. Which isn't entirely new to me. I mean, I remember if you're talking about an out there crime, I wouldn't say that people should be as worried about this, but when the Somali pirates were attacking a lot of vessels off of Somalia, we were using 200-year-old statutes for piracy because that had been the last time we had been doing a lot of piracy. And one of the things that I worked on when I worked in counterterrorism was the only modern treason indictment. Which was an American member of Al Qaeda, who subsequently died in a drone strike. Mm-hmm. But taking us back to the very founding of our nation, the problems that we encountered, slavery, piracy, treason, I mean, those things don't completely go away, I guess. Sometimes they come right back around. What would I say people should be the most surprised by? That's an interesting question.
Well, let me follow up on that, because you mentioned the word Somali, and so that opens the door. And I really want to be sure to cover this. I had people asking me, be sure to ask her about this, and that is fraud. There's I have two tracks on this, so I'll give my personal. I'm from down south, where the fraud was low rent, low dollar, whatever. I came to New England. I lived in Boston for a while. The level of government fraud I saw, and it was kind of almost like culturally embraced. Of course, my brothers got two jobs at the same time. I said, Tony and Joey, we're doing the job. And so there's, on the one hand, there's this, you could argue, like a culture of, it's a little bit wiggly around there. On the other hand, the volume of fraud, particularly since COVID, is just jaw-dropping. And so the question people want me to ask you is, how is New Hampshire doing when it comes to whether it's federal dollars, which would be your department, or state dollars, the best you can tell, when the taxpayers want to help somebody who needs help, they're hungry, they need a job, whatever, are the tax dollars ending up where they need to be? And how focused are you on that issue?
We certainly still, even now, have pandemic fraud cases that we're still running through. We're still finding some things we can address criminally, some civilly, just for claiming money for the American taxpayer that has been wrongly paid to someone who's going to use it fraudulently. I mean, fraud is ubiquitous. It is a huge problem. We have an older population in New Hampshire. They have their retirement nest egg. They are targets. They are targets for these gold bar scams. They are targets for these sort of fake crypto withdrawals, for being spoofed. The voice of their grandchild is taken off of TikTok with a fake, I need money for bail, I've been arrested on spring break. And it's so many cases. I think that you see this initiative in the AG's office to have a particular elder fraud unit, which just obtained a great result. I think they had a 8-year or so sentence on a case. That's rarer in the federal system, I'll say. One of the things when I'm working with my state partners and we're saying, what should you take? What should we take? Fraud isn't getting those kind of sentences on the federal system. That same conduct they got 8 years on in the state system would probably get 6 months in the federal system. What the federal system's the best at is big dollar, big fraud operations. This ubiquitous, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 frauds. We're not really getting the great time that the state can sometimes get on those. So we're often more assisting with investigations. Our law enforcement agencies are helping them get all that info. But it's a huge problem. I could do nothing but prosecute these frauds all day, and I don't even know if I would put a complete dent in it. One of the big things we try to do is educate the public, because we can prevent more crime than we can prosecute by telling people what the common scams are. But it's a huge problem in New Hampshire. There's a lot of fraud targeting our older population.
So the story of fraud of government services, both food aid and welfare aid in Minnesota, is a big story. The White House has indicated that there's something possibly going on in Maine. How are you in touch with your colleagues in Maine? Do you know anything about that story you could tell the readers of New Hampshire Journal?
Well, I wouldn't want to get out in front of my friend and colleague Andrew Benson, who's the U.S. Attorney in Maine, who I think is going to be a great U.S. Attorney relatively recently. That he was sworn in there. He's been a judge there for a long time. Was a homicide prosecutor before. I couldn't tell you what they're investigating, even if I knew, because I'd be stepping all over his feet. But he is a very good prosecutor, and I think if there's anything that they're to find, I know that he will be on top of it.
Well, listen, we really appreciate your time. So 6 months-ish into the job or so, what's been kind of the biggest surprise?
Well, I don't think I would be doing my biggest duty to the office that I absolutely have to do, which is to say that we're hiring. In order to discharge our mission, we need to be appropriately staffed. And this is a big mission. This is the blood and treasure of our democracy. Through our civil proceedings, through our criminal proceedings, we're protecting the things that keep a democracy vibrant. And we don't have enough people to do everything that the people of New Hampshire need us to do. That 9/11 generation that I was a part of, that generation's a little closing now. We're moving into a generation that's maybe a little bit less interested in public service. But there will always be people who are called to do this, to protect the public. And I hope that those people will want to do it at the U.S. Attorney's Office for New Hampshire, because as you're pointing out, the threats are coming from all sides, and we need the people to protect American lives, to protect American money and taxpayer money. And anybody who wants to do it, I hope they'll come and do it here, whether they're attorneys, whether they're support staff. There's a lot of work to be done.
Well, U.S. Attorney Erin Creegan, thank you so much for joining us here on New Hampshire Journal. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.